최종적으로 추구하는 꿈이 아마 평화가 아닌가 싶습니다. 한국에도 중국에도 우리하고 비슷한 우리 옆에 있는 친구와 비슷한 그런 사람이 살아있구나라는 것을 깨닫게 하는 것 그것이 우리 번역가의 역할이고 책임이고 또 저의 꿈이라고 생각합니다.
Hello and welcome to Arirang's special news coverage of the country's snap election. It's June 3rd, election day here in South Korea. I'm Min Sun-hee. We start our special newscast at a polling place here in capital Seoul as voting began at 6 o'clock this morning. My colleague An Sung-jin has been on site since that early hour and joins me now. Sung-jin, welcome back.
Great to be here, Sunny.
So it continues to be an orderly voting process at your end.
Right, Sunny. So I'm currently standing in front of a polling location in Sadangdong in Seoul's Dongjakgu district. It's a little bit past 5 p.m. here, which means that the voting process would have already begun with more than 11 hours since 6 a.m. this morning. Now, I was out here since the early hours, and the polling station was most bustling when it first opened and during lunchtime. Now, it seems to have calmed down a bit following the last hours of the presidential election. The polling station that I'm at is one of the 14,295 nationwide and 2,260 from Seoul. We already saw the second highest voter turnout rate for early voting, and many have gathered to vote since this early morning as well. Sunny, if I were to point something out that I spot more frequently here is that a lot of people are taking pictures in front of the polling station with a ballot stamp on their hand. This shows that a lot of Koreans are participating in an I Voted movement, which also features so-called certification sheets with art or characters where people can stamp them to show that they voted. Voters have come here to exercise their right to vote, so have a listen to what some of them had to say.
Though the results should be out after midnight, I'm sure a lot of people are looking out for it. It seems like more people are interested in politics nowadays because the economy is difficult. I want the world to be a fair place where I can succeed with my own skills.
I came out here to vote before going out with my family in the hope of picking a good leader for our country.
Right, the hope of picking a good leader, it's a universal one, if I may say so myself. Sung-jin, for those who have yet to vote, do you have any last-minute words of advice?
Right, Sunny. So we have less than 3 hours left since voting started at 6 a.m. and will end at 8 p.m. Voters must be 18 or above and bring a government-issued ID. Now, unlike early voting, voters can only vote or only cast their ballot based on their registered address. Which polling station they can go and vote at can be found on a voting guide delivered to each household or through the National Election Commission website. Anyone who arrives at the polls and stands in line before the polls close has the right to vote. Taking selfies or pictures of the ballots while inside the polling booth is strictly prohibited. That's all I have for now for a glimpse at the polling station for this hours, and I will be back with more updates later. Back to you, Sunny.
All right, Sung-jin, thank you for that report. And again, for those words of caution against taking pictures within polling stations. Now, we are counting down about 3 hours to the end of the election as polling places are poised to close doors at 8 this evening. For a glimpse of the turnout thus far, I have our Iani standing by live at the National Election Commission. Iani, it's great to have you back.
Hi, Sunny. It's good to see you.
So what has been shared about the voter turnout as we speak, Iani?
Well, Sunny, I'm at the National Election Commission in Gwacheon City, where officials are keeping track of the voter turnout. It's been around 11 hours since the polls opened this morning at 6 a.m. Over 30 million people have cast their ballots for the 21st presidential election, and as of 4 p.m., we are seeing the highest turnout as of that time for any Korean presidential election, with the voter turnout being at 71.5%. As voter turnout continues to rise, the current turnout as of 5 p.m. is at 73.9%, which includes early voters. Figures by region are as of 4 p.m. Jeollanam-do province, which showed the highest early voter turnout rate, is showing the highest total voter turnout at 79.3%. The lowest turnout is on Jeju Island at 68.1%. Daegu, which had the lowest early voter turnout, now stands at 70.4%. Busan is at 69%, while Gwangju is at 78.3%. Incheon stands at 69.8%, and Daejeon stands at 71%. The capital, Seoul, is seeing a turnout of 71.5%. Gyeonggi-do province stands at 71.4%, while Jeollabuk-do province is at 77.5%. For other provinces, turnout in Chungcheongbuk-do is 69.7%, Chungcheongnam-do 68.7%, Gyeongsangbuk-do 71.1%, and Gyeongsangnam-do 7.1%. So far, the hourly voter turnout is slightly higher than in the 2022 presidential election, which ended with a final turnout of 77.1%. So now the focus is on the final turnout rate.
Right, I see. Iani, when might we learn about the result of this latest election?
Yes, Sunny. So as the voting ends at 8 p.m., the ballot boxes will be sealed and taken to counting centers under police escorts. Counting begins soon after, and the National Election Commission expects counting to finish around 6 a.m. Wednesday morning. The results should become clear by midnight once 70 to 80% of votes are counted. However, final results, of course, may take longer depending on voter turnout and how close the race is. Once counting is done, the NEC will hold a full committee meeting in which the new president will be formally declared. This meeting is expected to happen between 7 and 9 a.m. on Wednesday, and the process should only take 5 to 10 minutes. The new president's term will immediately begin. Earlier on Monday, Do Tae-ak, chairman of the National Election Commission, urged active voter participation, emphasizing the importance of creating a united South Korea through voting. No assured the public that the NEC has prioritized transparency, highlighting measures such as 24-hour CCTV at early voting stations and a vote paper inspection system, both implemented in last year's general election. Authorities are focusing on safety management as well. The National Fire Agency has launched special emergency operations at over 15,000 polling and counting stations nationwide. This will run until ballot counting ends. Also this morning at 6 a.m., police declared the highest level of emergency alert, mobilizing all available personnel. This heightened readiness will continue until the new president's inauguration is complete and he arrives at his office on Wednesday. Around 60,000 officers are assigned to polling station security, 45,000 to ballot transport, and 7,000 to counting center protection. That's all I have for now. I'll be back with more updates for later. Back to you, Sunny.
Right, please do so, Iani. Thank you for now. We turn now to the National Assembly, where the two main political parties have set up camps to monitor the vote count that is slated to begin after polling stations close doors at 8 this evening. First then, I have our Moon Hae-ryun joining me live from the Liberal camp. Hae-ryun, it's good to have you back. So what's the latest there where you are?
Good afternoon, Sunny. So I'm still here in the main conference hall where the DP has set up its situation room, and party members will start gathering here later this evening. And as you can probably see behind me, 2 large screens have been set up towards the front of the hall and 10 smaller screens set up on the stage itself, which is how the party and its candidate Lee Jae-myung will be watching the vote count unfold once the polls close at 8 p.m. Lee Jae-myung is resting at his home in Gyeong Incheon as he has no official schedule for today after finishing up his final rally last night. Earlier today, he posted a message on his Facebook profile appealing for voter participation. Referring to the protest that took place here in Yeouido following the martial law declaration on December 3rd last year, he said that a win in this election wouldn't be a win for him, but a win for the people. He's expected to head over here once the voting concludes and the results begin to take shape. Once they do roll in, they will no doubt influence the atmosphere and the energy in this room. He was the forerunner in national polls before the blackout for new polls 6 days ago, so expectations are high among party members, hoping to ride that momentum to a win tonight. With all eyes now on how tonight's results will unfold, that's all I have for now, but there'll be more updates in a later newscast. Back to you, Sunny.
All right, Arirang, thank you for the latest from the Liberal camp. Up next, we touch base with the Conservative camp, also at the National Assembly, preparing for its members to gather for the vote count. I have our correspondent, Oh Soo-young, standing by live. Soo-young, what's the atmosphere like there at the PPP?
Well, we still have 3 more hours to go, Sunny, until polling stations close. So the room where I am now, the situation room set up by the People Power Party, it still has yet to fill up with journalists to watch the vote counting together. So we have a little bit of time left. And, well, I would say that the mood within the party members and among their supporters as well is rather mixed. So there's optimism, there's hope, which always, of course, springs eternal in any election campaign. But there's also a sense of finality and also some anxiety as the candidate Kim Moon-soo has been lagging behind Democratic Party candidate Lee Jae-myung in national polls throughout the campaign by around 10 percentage points, with some earlier polls showing an even wider gap. Still, there's cautious optimism that Kim did his absolute best in the campaign, and there might be a turnaround among the so-called shy conservatives and undecided voters. Now, as per tradition, Kim Moon-soo himself will monitor the ballot counting process from his home in Gwanak-gu district, southern Seoul. And earlier today, he put out a statement on Facebook urging voters to prevent DP's Lee Jae-myung from coming to power, saying that this election is the final opportunity to block a, quote, monstrous autocracy. He called on voters to defend liberal democracy, the rule of law, market economy, and the South Korea-US alliance. Now, if the vote count indicates that Kim might be the winner, then he's going to come right here to the Situation Room at the National Assembly's library tonight. Key PPP figures, of course, will be on standby at the party's election headquarters from 7:30 p.m. Back to you, Sunny.
All right, Soo-young, thank you for that coverage of the Conservative camp, and do keep us posted. The political events taking place here in South Korea over the past few months have been making quite a bit of international headlines as well. Our Kim Bo-kyung reports.
Those in South Korea are not the only ones eagerly waiting to see who will be the next president. Many foreign media outlets are reporting on South Korea's presidential election in real time as they pay close attention to who the next leader might be. Reuters said South Koreans were voting to cap 6 months of turmoil triggered by a shock martial law by former leader, and highlighted the challenges new leader faces, a society scarred by the attempt at military rule and an export-heavy economy reeling from unpredictable protectionist moves by the United States. CNN pointed out how significant this election is to the country, as it has floundered for months with interim leaders that keep changing while navigating Yoon's impeachment trial and an investigation into the short-lived martial law. It highlighted how voters are most interested in the country's flailing economy and rising cost of living that were partly caused due to Trump's trade war as it hit South Korea's export-reliant economy hard. That is why both candidates focused on the economy, CNN said, while underlying other problems such as the demographic crisis and regional tensions that must be tackled as well. BBC shed light on how some voters are having a dilemma of whether they would vote or not, as neither of the leading candidates are very popular in the polls, while British newspaper Independent focused on high early voting turnout. Neighboring countries' media outlets, including Japanese broadcaster NHK and Chinese Xinhua news agency, covered the election, with Xinhua explaining that the snap election is being held due to the failed attempt at martial law by former President Yoon and his subsequent removal from office. 김보경, 아리랑 뉴스.
In this segment of our special news coverage, we touch upon the election and its broader implications on diplomacy, defense and the economy with a local pundit. For more, I have Dr. Pong Young-sik, a visiting professor at Yonsei University, here in the studio with me. Dr. Pong, it's a pleasure to have you with us.
Good evening.
Let's start off with the voter turnout, Dr. Pong. Now, we were expecting the early voter turnout to surpass the high noted back in the year 2022, but that was not the case. However, according to my colleagues on the ground, the voter turnout today, election day, is quite impressive, quite remarkable, quite strong. Let's start with your thoughts regarding these findings.
I guess the magic number we need to pay attention to in terms of voters turnout this time is 77%, because in the previous two presidential elections, both regular election and the snap presidential election, the turnout was 77.1% last time between Mr. Yoon Suk-yeol and Mr. Lee Jae-myung, and the previous one 77.3%. So if it surpasses 77% or even goes higher than that, then I would say that turnout would be very strong. The early voting turnout was 2.2% less than that of the last presidential election, but there is a reason for that, because in the previous presidential election, the 2 days for the early votings include one holiday on weekend, but this time both early voting days were weekdays, so not many people could have, departed their work early to cast their ballots. So we have a very strong turnout, and we are left with about 3 more hours before the voting booths will be closed. So I would cautiously predict that the turnout would be more than 77.1%, the turnout rate of the previous presidential election.
Right, I suppose we'll know for sure after 3 hours then. Dr. Pong, so the election ends at 8 p.m. this evening. When can we expect to see a result, do you think?
I can assure you that the time will be prior to 1 a.m. tomorrow morning, because if you remember, then the last presidential election between Yoon Suk-yeol and Lee Jae-myung was so neck and neck. Yoon Suk-yeol carried the election by razor-thin margin, 0.73%, right? So the voting count took so much time before the National Election Commission officially declared the winner. But this time, it is assumed that the victory margin would be far greater than 0.73%, which is the closest margin in history of presidential election in South Korea anyway. The biggest margin was 22.5% that President Lee Myung-bak won in 2007. So it will be very interesting to see that the victory margin would be, how much? Like the 22.5% to break the record. It is very unlikely, right? Because the election this time is far more competitive than that one in 2007. But at the same time, it will not be as competitive as the previous election. The victory margin was 0.73%. So I would say that it is reasonable to expect the official result will come out sometime before midnight.
Right, which is also the outlook.
Before end of today.
Right. Dr. Bong, so this time tomorrow, we will have a new leader at the top office seeking to chart a new path for South Korea. One of the tasks that he faces, of course, is the tariff talks with the US. That being said, how do you see a liberal leader seeking to approach tariff talks with the Trump administration, and what would be the pros and cons of such an approach?
I have a tremendous sympathy for whoever is going to be the next president of South Korea, because this is a very trying time to lead a country. whether you're from the liberal background or conservative background, and not only the economic challenges, but also security challenges. In terms of economic challenges, then you know very well the tariff bomb levied by the Trump administration 2.0 really shocked the entire world, and the trade war between China and the United States, by and large, still remains in limbo. So that has a direct impact upon the future of South Korean trade and economic relationship with not only with the United States, but also China. But there's a silver lining in this challenging time because the United States, China, and all the other important trading partners of South Korea genuinely understand that South Korean government has not been in a position to engage in any fruitful trade negotiations because of there's a clear leadership void. Because the ruling by the Constitutional Court in favor of the dismissal of former President Yoon Suk-yeol only came in early April. And this time the president has to assume the power immediately after the official declaration of the election result. United States clearly understand that the trade negotiation between Seoul and Washington has to wait for the clearer conclusion of the political calendar in South Korea. There's no way that United States could pressure South Korea for earlier conclusion of the trade negotiations anyway. So the trade negotiation team of South Korea made this point really clear to the government officials of Trump administration that concrete negotiation result has to wait until early July, about the time that the 90-day retrieve of the tariff, reciprocal tariff on South Korea would officially end. So it is very likely for the Trump administration to prolong the bilateral trade negotiation with South Korea, probably with another pause of the execution of the reciprocal tariff upon South Korea at 25%.
The Liberal candidate had spoken about the need for more time. Do you see the conservative, if a conservative candidate were to win the election, do you suppose that he too would ask for more time?
I think so. So the main point of my argument is that whoever wins the election, whether he's or he, all four major candidates are male, whoever is going to be the next president of South Korea, then the approach to the trade negotiation with Trump administration of the United States would have been more of the same because it's a bipartisan condition that determines the strategic position of South Korean economy anyway.
With regard to South Korea's North Korea policy then, Dr. Bong, do you believe we'll see a tangible discrepancy in this particular policy depending on which political party becomes the ruling bloc?
Unfortunately, yes, from very negative point of view, because if you have listened to their views on national security and North Korea policy, no president candidate has successfully demonstrated very clear vision or strategy to deal with these issues. For instance, Mr. Lee Jae-myung highlights his desire to conduct foreign policy of South Korea with pragmatism, but pragmatism without principle would be nothing, right? It'll be only short-sighted and temporary in nature. And Mr. Kim Mun-soo expresses the view that South Korea has to pursue its own nuclear weapons, but it's a non-starter without wholehearted embrace and the support from the United States and other allies. And Lee Jun-seok said that he would pursue unconditional summit meeting with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, but what's the point of having inter-Korean summit meeting if the meeting will not produce any ground-breaking result with regard to the nuclearization of North Korea? So when you combine all these policy proposals expressed by major president candidates, then I would say that their priorities do not lie in foreign policy or inter-Korean relations, but the focus is how to address the consequences of the declaration of martial law by former President Yoon Suk-yeol and his impeachment. there is a reason why this presidential election is termed as snap election. This presidential election would not have happened anyway had it not been for the impeachment of former President Yoon Suk-yeol. So impeachment of President Yoon Suk-yeol as a consequence of his declaration of martial law is like a vortex, sucking up all the other considerations, other political issues.
That being said then, Dr. Bong, I've seen your previous broadcast and you've shared quite a bit of practical advice with regard to dealing with North Korea. That being said, as a scholar, between the choice of carrots and sticks, what would you recommend in dealing with North Korea's persistent provocations?
Everything and anything. In order to deal with great threat and challenge to national security of South Korea, as well as international security in that regard from North Korea, you have to hit North Korea not just up and down, left and right, but also in the middle. So you have to use carrots and sticks in the right combination. But the problem is that ball is in the court of North Korea. North Korean leader declared that it is no longer interested in pursuing unification with South Korea, and it prefers to live as a separate country, adversarial country to South Korea. So South Korean government, after its inauguration, needs to come up with a new blueprint to deal with North Korea as it is, with a new doctrine, not as South Korea wants it to be.
Staying with security matters and keeping in mind the state of geopolitics as we speak, Dr. Bong, do you believe South Korea's policy with regard to its neighbor, Japan, will stay on track, regardless of which political party takes the ruling part?
Well, if Mr. Kim Moon-soo, representing the conservative PPP, is going to win the election, then I would say that continuing the Trilateral Security Cooperation among United States, South Korea, and Japan, which was built under the leadership of previous president of South Korea, Yoon Suk-yeol, is likely to continue at least, if not be augmented. What if other candidates win the election? For instance, Mr. Lee Jae-myung from Democrat Party. Well, he said that he believes in pragmatism in domestic politics and foreign policy. So if he's true to his words, his promises during the election campaign, then there's no urgent reason for South Korean government to scrap the Trilateral Security Cooperation with the United States and Japan, because it is interest of the United States as well, because the main target of global strategy of the United States, led by Trump administration in the second term, is containing China. And this Trilateral Security Cooperation with South Korea and Japan is well within the transactional foreign policy of Trump administration anyway. So if Trump administration is not going to rush to demolish the trilateral security arrangement left by his predecessor, Joe Biden, and then there's no urgent reason for South Korean government with the new president to depart from the Trilateral Security Cooperation with the United States and Japan either.
And speaking about the Trump administration, Dr. Bong, do you suppose the Trump administration is a reliable partner for South Korea?
Well, beauty is in the eyes of beholder,
Says Shakespeare.
Whether you believe Trump administration is reliable or not depends on what you want as a South Korean government from the United States, led by the Trump administration. And in that regard, that South Korea is very vital and important to Trump administration in its pursuit of core national interest of the United States in the name of America First policy. I'm not saying that Trump administration is all in love with South Korea, 100%, but there are important reasons for the Trump administration to work out a bilateral partnership with new government of South Korea for the interest of the United States. And the focus is, again, containing the rising power of China. And the South Korea constitutes a very important element of United States attempts to curb China's rise with its high technology and the global trade. So ignoring South Korea would undermine strategic interest of United States economy. And South Korea, alongside with Taiwan and Japan, constitutes the first island chain of the strategic posture of the U.S. forces abroad, close to China. So all these reasons combined, then Trump administration will be quite committed to working well with the new government of South Korea. So Trump administration will be a reliable partner, and so is South Korean government too, the Trump administration.
Dr. Bong, Mr. Trump's Oval Office receptions of his foreign counterparts, they've been raising quite a bit of international eyebrows. Do you suppose the future South Korean president may face a similar scenario? And if that is the case, what issues may be brought up?
Well, we have to wait and see, because President Trump is all about America first. And he has this tendency of using international affairs, including summit meeting with foreign dignitaries, not as a foreign affairs event, but for an opportunity to augment his domestic popularity, more like a campaign trail. So there is a reason for the new president of South Korea to be cautious and well prepared. But you know what is likely to happen. You have the benefit of having seen what happened to other foreign leaders in the White House. And just being nice will not cut it, because you remember how well the summit meeting between Japan's Prime Minister Ishiba and President Donald Trump went by. But what was the result in terms of trade war between United States and Japan? Japan still was hit hard by the reciprocal tariff, 24% by the Trump administration, despite very friendly, very productive, cordial White House summit meeting. So White House summit meeting is not everything and anything for South Korea's pursuit of national interest and its management of bilateral partnership with the United States.
Right. And borrowing your words, Dr. Bong, the Trump administration's tariffs have been hitting its trade partners left, right, and middle as well.
Yes.
Right. I'm afraid that's all the time we have. Dr. Bong, as always, thank you so much for your time and your insights.
You're welcome.
Granted, the most important task for the new administration is that related to the bread and butter issues affecting ordinary Koreans. But also important is its foreign policy direction, especially keeping in mind the current state of geopolitics. Our Kim Jung-sil covers the diplomatic policy proposals of the top three contenders.
Three frontrunners, three different visions for South Korea's role on the global stage. In their final televised debate, the candidates outlined foreign policy agendas that could reshape the country's position in a region facing rapid change. Democratic Party candidate Lee Jae-myung called for balance between the U.S. alliance and stable ties with China and Russia. He warned of a diplomatic vacuum since the December 3rd martial law unrest and said South Korea's approach must evolve.
The U.S. alliance is the foundation of our foreign policy. It must be developed practically, inclusively, and with a long-term vision. But we must not neglect ties with China and Russia. They require careful, strategic management.
On North Korea, Lee seems to be charting a different course from past progressive leaders favoring step-by-step engagement over demands for immediate denuclearization. Conservative candidate Kim Moon-soo took a harder line, saying diplomacy must be backed by strength.
Kim Jong-un's dictatorship threatens our lives and property with nuclear weapons and missile provocations. I will build a transparent, principled inter-Korean relationship and strengthen our defenses by reinforcing nuclear deterrence through the U.S. alliance.
At the same time, his team told Arirang News he's open to meeting North Korea's leader while supporting economic and cultural engagement as long as it's grounded in South Korea's constitutional principle of one unified nation. At 40, Lee Jun-suk is the youngest candidate in the race. Last week, he laid out his latest foreign policy vision backed by sweeping institutional reform.
The president of South Korea must have international experience and a practical mindset. If elected, I will merge the unification and foreign ministries and appoint a deputy prime minister for national security to oversee foreign affairs, unification and defense policies.
He said South Korea should lead its alliance and not just rely on it. 3 visions for South Korea's future on the world stage. By tonight, one of them will begin to shape it. 김정실, Arirang News.
Now, while the top 3 candidates differ on diplomacy, they all agree on the dire state of the Korean economy. That being said, our business correspondent Lee Soo-jin takes a look at their respective economic prescriptions. To take a listen.
With economic institutions both at home and abroad revising down their growth projections for South Korea, economic pledges are taking center stage in the presidential race.
The domestic economy shrank by 0.2% in the first quarter. Negative growth. How can our people make a living like this? Please elect Lee Jae-myung, a capable, loyal, and well-prepared worker as president.
It's true that Korea is now in a slump with very low growth, among the worst globally, right? I will bring this economy back to life as the president of the economy, everyone.
Half of Democratic Party candidate Lee Jae-myung's pledges focus on the economy, while 7 out of 10 of People Power Party candidate Kim Moon-soo's are economic pledges. And Lee's top economic pledge and Kim's second is artificial intelligence, signaling how both view it as central to Korea's economic growth. Both propose investing 100 trillion won, or around $71 billion into fostering the AI industry, but their plans of how they'll use these funds differ. Lee Jae-myung's AI for All initiative aims to expand public access by offering free advanced AI services, including a Korean version of ChatGPT, while also pledging to secure over 50,000 high-performance GPUs. Kim plans to set up a public-private fund to foster AI unicorns and vows to train 200,000 young specialists through graduate programs and software-focused universities. But both agree that Korea's regulations are outdated, with Lee calling for special exemptions and Kim pushing to align regulations with global standards. Reform Party candidate Lee Jun-seok, currently 3rd in the polls, has proposed market-driven AI innovation with minimal state intervention. And another issue that has garnered much attention is each candidate's bid to improve work-life balance.
Also, he focused on 4.5-day work week. Is actually aimed at reducing worker fatigue and improving work-life balance. If you look at the Kim Moon-soo's proposal, he believes that with a good negotiation between workers and employers, a more flexible system can be achieved without making dramatic changes.
He has proposed reducing the standard work week from 40 to 36 hours by cutting Friday afternoons without reducing wages. Kim's plan adds an extra hour per day from Monday to Thursday for a shorter Friday without reducing total hours, and includes exemptions to the 52-hour cap for the semiconductor sector. And Lee Jun-seok, instead of a 4.5-day workweek proposal, has pledged labor reforms that include giving local governments the authority to adjust the minimum wage to revitalize regional economies. Though each candidate's visions differ, their focus on the economy underscores its central role in this election. Lee Soo-jin, Arirang News.
요새 쉬었음 청년들이 굉장히 사회 문제로 대두되고 있는데 그 부분에 대한 해결이 가장 먼저 이루어져야 될 거라고 생각합니다.
저는 일단 각자가 말하는 정책에 대해서 집중하고 그래도 5년이라는 길다면 길고 짧다면 짧은 시간 동안 본인이 말하는 거에 대해서 잘 지켜가는 정부가 되었으면 좋겠습니다.
기후와 관련해서는 조금 더 재생에너지나 뭐 이런 쪽에 조금 더 관심을 가지고 탈원전 정책에 조금 더 관심을 가지는 그런 정부가 되었으면 좋겠습니다.
대학 서열화를 끝내고 그리고 사교육 시장을 줄이는 방향으로 좀 더 평등한 교육 정책을 위해서 애써야 되지 않나 이런 생각을 갖고 있습니다.
누가 돼도 상관은 없지만 그 공약을 하셨다면 하나라도 지켜주는 게 있었으면 좋겠어요. 아무래도 자영업 쪽에 있다 보니까 자영업자 쪽에 조금 더 신경을 써줬으면 좋을 것 같아요.
일단 기본적으로 주거 안정이 좀 제대로 이루어졌으면 하는 바람입니다.
없는 분들을 좀 생각해서 서로가 나눔의 실천을 했으면 좋겠어요.
아무래도 제가 이제 30대 초반이다 보니까 이제 결혼 이런 관련해서 정책들이 물론 지금도 잘 나오고 있는 것 같은데 아직도 청년들이 좀 결혼을 준비하는 데 있어서 어려움을 겪고 있기 때문에 결혼 문제에 있어서 좀 이제 정책 같은 것도 좀 더 많이 완화되고 대출 규제라든지 이런 것들 많이 좀 풀어졌으면 좋겠다라는 생각이 있습니다.
Right, on that note, we end our special coverage of the presidential election for now. We return with updates at 7:30 p.m. Korea Standard Time. Do join us then.